Welcome to The Hopeful Divorce. I'm Hope, your family law friend. After working in family law firms for many years and watching thousands of divorces play out, I've learned some things about what does and doesn't work, and I'm here to share. This question is from the DivorceDads subreddit. Divorce when the house is underwater and neither of us can afford to buy the other out. We bought in 2021 at the peak, and the house is worth less than what we owe now. Neither of us can refinance solo, can't agree on whether to sell at a loss or keep living separately under the same roof until the market shifts. 2 kids who are both in elementary school. How do I go about this? Oh, this is a tough situation, and it's a somewhat common situation, particularly now because in the last few years since the pandemic, we've seen some really big spikes and drops in real estate. Now, generally, real estate just tends to slowly get more valuable over time, but occasionally there are things where it will jump really high or drop really low. And when that happens and there's a divorce happening, it's really tough. When you're upside down on your house, it's a tough situation to deal with. Now, first he said, should we stay under the same roof living separately? No, you should not. Whatever your solution to this problem is, I think you're not in agreement on this, first of all, so that tells me there's a little bit of tension in this case, which is completely natural and normal. You can't agree what to do and you have 2 young children. You should not try to live separately in the same house. Sometimes I have seen people who will live separately in the same house and they can make it work because they're 2 adults and they don't really need to talk to each other, and maybe they can even physically set things up so that they barely run into each other in the same house. Sometimes in those situations, you can live separately and you can do that even for a long time. But if there are 2 young children involved, you need to move out, or your ex needs to move out. Somebody needs to move out. And so what it's going to get down to, if you can do anything with this, is if you are very lucky, there is a possibility that you could hold on to the house and have one of you move out. I have seen people do this successfully. It can be done, but usually the math simply doesn't work. And you kind of have to have some really special lucky circumstances in order for it to work out for most people. Most people cannot afford to, pay the mortgage and pay rent on another place to live. Even if you're still combining all your finances, it's usually hard for people to do that, and you just can't make the math work. So what I would recommend you do first is call your realtor, call your mortgage broker, and say, look, we know we're upside down. What are our options for selling this house? Like, how much money will we lose? Can you do a short sale? This is something only your local realtor will be able to advise you on. Sometimes you can just do a short sale and the mortgage company will just let you walk away from it, even though you can't sell it for, the price to pay off your mortgage. They'll waive that so that you don't still owe the money. There is a possibility of doing that in some situations. May or may not be an option for you, but find out. If you will still have to take on a lot of debt that you both are going to have to share for a long time, well, then that you need to have that information so that you know exactly what your options are and what is going to be involved. Now, I do know someone who was able to make this work in 2009 when the housing market crashed all around the world and people were having, massive drops in the value of their homes at that time. And it was the entire real estate market everywhere. So people were not buying houses. So it was a very tough time. And I know a couple who divorced during that time. They didn't want to lose the house. And they also really wanted their children to just stay in the house that they've always known. So they were lucky. In that situation, the husband was able to stay with a relative. He had an uncle that lived relatively close by. That uncle had children who were already gone and in university, so he had a couple of guest rooms that weren't being used, and he did not mind at all having his nephew come and live with him for a few years. He was totally fine with it, and he was happy to have the children come on the weekends and to see his nephew's kids and have them in his house. They were very happy for that. They were, sort of like an extra grandparent to these children, and it worked out very well for them. And so because he wasn't paying rent to stay with his uncle, he could afford to keep paying the mortgage on their house. The wife had been a stay-at-home mom and hadn't worked for most of the marriage. So while he was paying the mortgage, he paid the mortgage in lieu of spousal support. And this was in California. And in California, you can do that. It has to be very, very clearly spelled out and it has to be written by a lawyer. But they were able to do that so that he didn't owe spousal support, but he paid for all of the mortgage and all of the expenses on maintaining the home while she lived in it. And during that time, she went out and got a job and re-entered the workforce. And this gave her some time for her to, reestablish her career and her earning potential. And after about 3 years, they sold the house at a profit and they were able to move on. But that doesn't work for everybody. And if you are going to do something like this, if you have a situation where either you can rent another place that's very affordable or stay with someone so that you can keep paying the mortgage and so forth, it's very important that you have a lawyer draft your separation agreement. This is not one for you to just do verbally, and this is not one for you to just, do it yourself using an online tool or an AI. I guarantee you will get some of this wrong. It's very complicated, and it's really important that it be written carefully to protect both parties. You have to address certain things like, what if it's been 3 years and the house still there's still no equity in the house and you really want to move on with your life, whatever your temporary living situation is, you want to get remarried or you want to, do something different with your life and you don't want to continue this arrangement, you should have some timelines on it. Because life changes, people move on. You want to have some clear guidelines, like if she has a new boyfriend move in, how does that change in terms of, the living arrangements and things like that? There's lots of scenarios that could happen over the next, 3 to 5 years while you're waiting for the house to gain equity. And every one of those things should be addressed very clearly in your separation agreement. Like, what happens if the house needs a new furnace or it needs a new roof and it's a big major expense? Who is going to be responsible for paying that and how is it going to be handled? You want to have very clear terms like that in this agreement. And so it's very important that you talk to a lawyer in your jurisdiction. In some places, you might not be able to pay the mortgage in lieu of spousal support. Okay, this was a case in California and you could do that there. Depending on where you live, that might not be an option. So you might have to actually pay spousal support and then have the spouse pay their half of the mortgage or something like that. I don't know. It depends on where you live, but that's why it's so important to do this with a lawyer. And if you cannot make the math work, you might just have to walk away. You might just have to do a short sale, or, your lawyer might be able to suggest that you could rent the property. Maybe you both move out of the house and you get renters in the property and they cover the mortgage for the next 5 years. And then you have an agreement to sell at that point. I would talk to your realtor. They're going to be able to give you the best advice about the particulars of your house and your real estate market where you live. These things vary a lot, and what might make sense in one place would not make sense in another place. So rely on the professionals who can give you advice, the lawyers, the realtors, the mortgage people, and see what all of your options are, and then take that information and proceed. But the one thing that I would say you should not do is keep living separately under the roof with your children. That's not going to be good for anybody. Taking a quick pause in today's episode to remind you, this podcast is built around your questions. If you're navigating divorce, separation, property division, child support, custody, co-parenting, blended families, or anything in between. You don't have to figure it out alone. Chances are, if you're wondering about something, someone else is too. You can submit your questions anytime through my website at hopefuldivorce.com. Whether it's a big, complicated situation or a simple, what does this legal term mean, or why does this happen this way? All questions are welcome. I read every submission, and your question could be featured in an upcoming episode to help not just you, but others going through similar experiences. So if something's been on your mind, send in your question. Let's keep the conversation moving forward. This question is from the Divorce Men subreddit. My ex will be moving 2 blocks away. Currently still married, emotionally separated for years now, and using mediation to try and reach an agreement for split of assets and financial support. We are generally friendly, which is forced, and we are trying to be fair about it all, which is not forced, and trying to keep our 3 children's health in mind as we separate and finalize a divorce. I've been a stay-at-home dad for almost 20 years, so no income or credit, changing that ASAP. She has had an arrangement with her job so that she has been working from home for most of the kids' life. That seemed great at first. I'm working toward keeping our family home while she keeps an apartment building we have had for the last 8 years. I don't want to gouge her and abuse any part of the process, not because of any feelings I have for her, but out of respect for my children's mother. I have consulted a lawyer and have found what I think is a good compromise on financial support for me that will take care of me as I try to get back into the workforce. Apologies if this gets too long. We have had boundary issues for a very long time. As the primary parent, I tried to set what I thought were healthy boundaries for my children, myself, and us as a couple, and she essentially torpedoed any boundary I tried to establish as the main parent in the house. Many times we agreed on a course of action for the children. I would carry through, but she would give in to the kids, throwing me under the bus. So I became the grumpy dad saying no, and she became the awesome mom who would give them anything they wanted. This happened a lot. I could write a bigger wall of text about this, but I gathered up a lot of anger and resentment as the children got older. They're all teens now. And basically, physically, mentally detached from her during COVID. I'm not innocent in the failure of our marriage, but I wanted to give a little context. I am eager and need to move on from this relationship. She will always be their mother, and so I will be respectful in the future, but boundary issues keep happening. She has tried to control the split of the assets and suggested minimal support for a minimal amount of time, suggesting she stay on as a primary mortgage owner and continue to pay for me as part of the support agreement. Talking to a lawyer helped me settle that in a satisfactory manner. Now she is saying she wants to buy a house 2 blocks away, so it will be easier transition for the children. She is saying we would still have Christmas together and birthdays and whatnot. I feel like this is control on her part. I do not want her living effectively in my backyard and seeing her every time I walk the dogs. I feel like the children might also not benefit from this because we're all going to need time and space to heal. I'm not sure if it is healthy if the children can go back and forth anytime between houses. Most importantly, aside from required interactions with the children, which I am perfectly fine with, I do not want her in my life. We are close to having a formal separation agreement in place, but it is not there yet, so she cannot get another mortgage at the moment. I can't stop her from doing this legally, but am I an a-hole if I delay getting the separation agreement so she can't put an offer in on the house? Wow, this is a great question and a really interesting situation. First, the short answer to your question, would you be an a-hole if you delayed it? I would say no. You've got some big concerns here. And so no one should feel rushed into signing a final agreement. And whatever the facts are, you need to talk to a lawyer again. You need to understand everything fully. So no, you would not be an a-hole for delaying. And if the effect of that is that she can't get this particular house, well, that's just how it happened. You shouldn't be rushed into it. Now, I want to back up a little bit and look at this question a little bit more. We're hearing his side of the story. We don't know her side of the story. He feels like she's being controlling and that there are no boundary issues, and that is completely valid. And whatever happened in their marriage, I think it's generally a good idea to have two separate homes and to not be so physically close. His concern about he's going to see her every time he walks the dogs, that the kids would not have a schedule they can just go back and forth anytime they want to. That sounds great in theory. A lot of people say, no, we want the kids to be so close that they can just go back and forth. But that becomes an issue with parenting. When you have teenagers especially, sometimes your role as a parent is to be the bad cop and ground them, or to enforce some sort of discipline and teach your children that they have to leave for school on time, or they can't stay out all night, or whatever they're doing. And if they can just go to the other parent's house anytime you discipline them, that is not good, because then there's no enforcing discipline and teaching kids. And teenage years especially, that's when it's most important that you are on the same page in terms of, whatever rules are being enforced. So this is a very legitimate concern. Going back and forth whenever they want to is just basically a fairy tale. And it's not good for the children. There should be designated schedule when they're with one parent or the other parent. And for the most part, you should follow that. Now, there's always going to be circumstances where flexibility is required, but the stability of a regular schedule is very important for children. And then just having that physical separation where you don't run into each other is also really important for both people to move on. So I do think that this is an important issue to bring up. Now, I would request more mediation, and I would bring this up and say it's not healthy. She's saying that she wants Christmas to be together and she wants birthdays to be together, and that is fine if that's how it works out. But you can't force that kind of thing. Dad is not feeling comfortable with that, then I would say your parenting plan should have a schedule for how holidays and birthdays are going to be divided. And that is what the plan is. Now, if it's, let's say it is dad is going to have the children, just for example, dad is going to have the children for Christmas this year. He could choose to invite mom to come over, but the parenting plan says that this year dad has the children for Christmas, that the mom has them on Boxing Day, and that is what the plan is. And having a schedule with a plan for all of your holidays and your vacations really is the best way to go. You can choose, if you want to change that as it goes on, but the plan is already written in place and that's how it's going to be. But at your invitation, they can come over on your holiday time. That really is the best way, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. What if you get a new partner? Our new partner is going to be invited to the family Christmas. That could be very contentious. What if you change your mind and you want to take the children to visit your extended family, and your extended family doesn't want your ex there? Like, there's so many things that could happen. And this mom may have really good intentions, and a lot of people have really good intentions in saying that, we're just going to work together and we're going to share holidays. But when you talk to a lot of children who have grown up with divorced parents, they'll tell you that the forced holiday time together sometimes can be really uncomfortable for everybody. Everybody has good intentions and they're like, no, we can get along. But when there is underlying anger and resentment, it comes out in small ways. The kids pick up on it. And it's just not comfortable for everybody, and they just don't want to be there for it all. And so having a split holiday and birthday schedule is really good. And then if things have progressed to the point where now you all are very comfortable and it really is okay, well, you can just invite the other parent to join you, because it's very comfortable. And if the other parent invites you to join on their holiday time, You don't have to accept if you don't feel comfortable. You can just say, no, I've made plans with someone else for this year. But having that schedule in place really is important. It really is in the best interest of the children. And as this man is, figuring out what's going to happen with his career and so forth, it sounds like he's got spousal support set up for a certain amount of time where he will be able to refinance and have the matrimonial home in his name only. That can be a really great option because the kids can stay in the same house. If they have friendships with kids in the neighborhood and things like that, that makes it easier. But they're still going to be spending a certain amount of time at their other parents' house, and that is okay for them, for teenagers to be doing that. And it's okay for mom to be close, but maybe not so close. And he could bring up in mediation and ask for a term that says she agrees to move at least, 3 kilometers away or something like that. I have seen terms like that in parenting plans. I think that if you address the concern in mediation, it sounds like so far this has been a pretty reasonable settlement process. They're using mediators, they're coming to agreement, they're getting pretty close. So it seems unlikely that you would need to go to court in this. You could probably get some terms agreed to in terms of boundaries and distance. And then if it does happen that she moves really close, then you deal with it at that point.
Thanks for listening to The Hopeful Divorce. If this episode was helpful to you, share it with someone who might need it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. And as you deal with challenges of separation, divorce, and rebuilding your life, always remember the wise words that Christopher Robin told his friend Winnie the Pooh. You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep moving forward.